Hello, and welcome back to the Follow Your Spark podcast. It's your host, Gina here, and this episode is airing on November 5th, 2024, which is the day of the presidential election in the United States. And when I was thinking about what episode to air this week, I felt called to pull an episode out of the archives. And I asked my intuition to guide me to what episode would serve you and this community, what message would be really relevant right now. So I have all of my podcast episodes. I wrote them, their names on cards and kind of spread them out like I would Oracle cards. And I chose one episode, and it was this one with Gaby Guzman that I originally aired back in June 2022, I believe. And this episode, as I was re-editing it and listening to it, did really feel so relevant and resonated with me deeply right now. And what I hope that you will take out of this conversation is that no matter what your political affiliations are, or your beliefs, or what you hope happens today or this week moving forward, my hope is that this episode helps you remember the power that each of us have to make a tremendously positive impact in our communities, with the causes that we care about, with the things that we deeply value. And that honestly is a big piece of my hope for this podcast in general, is to remind myself, to remind you that one person has the power to impact so much positive change. So again, no matter what happens today with this election, don't forget that you have tremendous power inside of you, that when each of us follows what we believe in, that when we support each other, when we have compassion for each other and all of our differences and all of our uniqueness, that's when we can create incredibly beautiful things in the world and in our communities, regardless of who might be president in this particular moment. So I hope that this episode resonates with you. And if there's anything that you want to share that stands out to you, feel free to leave a comment on YouTube or share with me on social media anything that stood out and resonated with you. All right, my friend, let's jump in. Hello, and welcome back to the Follow Your Spark podcast. I am so excited to have Gaby Guzman here with me today. And speaking of Follow Your Spark, we met back in 2018 when I was sitting in her co-shared working space with a mutual friend of ours, Nadia Payan, when I was telling Nadia about my newfound passion for feng shui and all of these things. And she was like, Gaby right over there is a feng shui consultant. And it was just this beautiful introduction. And it was my first experience working with a feng shui consultant, doing a consultation for my house. And it really sparked me to continue on my own journey in that. So I love how we met, and I've been so inspired to continue following her journey over the years. To share who Gaby is in the world, Gaby is an intuition coach committed to helping women become who they are so that they can be free, rooted in their intuitive wisdom. And she believes living in joy and pleasure are at the heart of reclaiming the abundance and expansion we desire, which sounds amazing. And Gaby has coached hundreds of women since 2015, and she is the original founder of Las Comadres membership community. And she is originally from the Dominican Republic. She is a bruja, an energy worker, and passionate about civic engagement, and sits on the board of the Alapata Collaborative. And she lives in South Florida with her son, partner, and blended family. And I am so excited to dive into this conversation. So Gaby, thank you so much for being here.
It's such a thrill. I feel like this moment is so full circle. I'm so happy to reconnect with you.
I love it. So I'll start with the same question I ask everyone at the beginning. When you hear that phrase, follow your spark, what does that mean to you? What comes up for you?
I mean, for me, that phrase is everything. Like that phrase encompasses the way that I've chosen to live my life. And I use the word chosen loosely. I feel like my spark is so intense that I don't think it will let me have it any other way. My spark demands that it be followed at this point of my life. And so it's amazing because trusting that spark, which is for me, that spark is my intuitive wisdom, what I know my path to be, has led me to everything I've desired. And it hasn't always been the path that I thought I was going to take, or the way that I thought I was going to get there, or at the pace I thought I was going to get there. But it has always led me to a truer version of who I am and to a more fulfilled and joyful person. So I continue to trust.
I love that so much. And I can relate to that for sure. Things don't always show up how we expect or how we want or on the timeline. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. And I know when we talked before this, you talked about entrepreneurship playing a big role in that journey. And I would love to hear too of how has that contributed to you following your spark? What has that looked like in your journey?
Well, it's really interesting because when I quit the last job I ever had in summer of 2014, I knew in that moment that I would never have another quote unquote job, that I would just do my own thing. And up until that moment, I had never in my life considered entrepreneurship, like ever. I was 34 years old. I was a single mom. I thought I needed, quote unquote, the stability and the consistency that full-time employment gave me. But in that moment, I just sort of knew that. I knew that, and I didn't understand how I knew it, but I knew it. And so I decided to go for it. And over the last 8 years, every single move around how my business has evolved has been a direct reflection of how I have personally grown and shifted in my passions and my interests. And so again, that spark calling me in different directions, whether it's, I started as a social media agency, and through the years, there's been marketing coach, business coach, feng shui consultant, energy worker, intuition coach, back to business coach, and a blend of all the things. Like now I'm happily sitting in this place where I'm just a blend of all of it. I think social media is the only thing I don't do anymore professionally, but really owning it. And I think with every layer that I've peeled and every step that I've taken, I've been able to build a business that reflects completely who I am and have the business continue to evolve as I have evolved.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I feel like entrepreneurship is the biggest personal development thing you could do of anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely been the thing that has required, invited, whatever, me to step into a higher version of myself and really face the things that were holding me back and grow in a whole new way. So I don't know if it's been the same for you.
But... Oh my God. I always say that, entrepreneurship is the greatest personal development work you can do, particularly when you are responsible for other humans, especially little humans, and that pressure of I make every penny. Mm-hmm. Like I always talk to people about that. People, I think, sometimes underestimate what that shift from full-time employment to entrepreneurship will do for your psyche. Mm-hmm. And for your emotional well-being and for your nervous system. Because I remember sitting in cubicles and having good weeks and bad weeks where I just was on Facebook, to be honest, most of the time, and weeks when I was like kicking ass at my work. I got the same paycheck.
Yep.
But when you're an entrepreneur, you are making every single penny.
Yes.
Every single penny. And there was a moment where that terrified me, and now it thrills me. Right? Mm-hmm. Now it's exciting. Now it's the possibility. Now I've built something sustainable and lasting. Mm-hmm. But that recognition, it's all up to me and my effort and my energy and how I'm showing up true to that and true to the journey is like a little mind-boggling at the beginning for sure. And it has you face every last insecurity you've ever had about yourself, about your self-confidence, your visibility, your ability and your capability. Like so much comes up.
Yeah.
And it's totally worth it, not to scare people. Like, for some of us, it is absolutely worth it. And for me, like what I've come to understand is that my business is my soul contract. This is where I came to learn these lessons. Mm-hmm. And if I chose to get a job tomorrow, then they would just appear somewhere else. The lessons would just surface in some other part of my life because these are the lessons I'm here to learn.
Yeah, I love it so much. And it just makes me think for entrepreneurs that your mindset is so important because like you said, in a job, you can have good days, you can have bad days, and you get paid the same versus in your business, like your personal energy matters so much. So pouring the work into, have a more stable mindset and energy and develop those things that support you. I think that's why it's such like I don't want to say pressure cooker, but like environment to encourage doing that work. because
Absolutely.
it makes such a big difference.
Absolutely.
I love that. Pausing this interview to say that if you are an entrepreneur and on this journey, or truly if you are taking any other leap of faith in your life and it feels scary and confronting and it's bringing up all of your stuff, first of all, I send you my love and I acknowledge you for your courage. I know it takes something to do that. And if it is bringing up all of your stuff, your fears, your insecurities, you're not doing it wrong. Like we've been talking about in this interview, challenges can be a beautiful opportunity and gift for us to heal and transform the parts of us that are ready to be healed and transformed. And I know this work can be a lot easier to do with support. And this is exactly what I get up to with my one-on-one coaching clients. I help my clients develop really positive habits and practices to tend to their mind, body, and spirit so they can lower stress, lower overwhelm, lower anxiety, and feel as equipped as possible to navigate these challenges and to connect to a vision for themselves and their lives and their work that really lights them up and have the courage and commitment to continue pursuing it. So if you're an entrepreneur or you're taking any other bold leap of faith in your life and you would love support, let's talk. Book a free consultation call by going to ginakasbara.com, and we will spend 75 minutes together exploring what your dreams are, what's holding you back, what's getting in the way, and what could support you the most to create a life you deeply love that feels aligned with your soul contract and purpose. So if that is calling to you, I cannot wait to connect. Like I said, just go to ginakasbara.com and book a free consultation call. Okay, let's get back to the interview. Speaking of following your spark, one of the reasons I originally reached out to you a couple weeks ago was because you posted something on Instagram about impact.
Yeah.
And you talked about that in order for all women, and I would imagine really all humans, that to genuinely heal, grow, open, trust, we must also see the impact and the value of how we support our communities and how we aim to make a positive difference in the world. So I would love if we could talk a little bit about this, because there's so many things going on in the world right now. And I know it can feel really daunting and overwhelming in a lot of ways. And I just would love to have a conversation of how can people look at impact maybe in a different way, and what are some accessible ways that they can really start to think about how we can have more of an impact in life.
Absolutely. I love this conversation, and I do feel like it's important to start at the root of that recognition of what consciousness, and I'm using quotes, like consciousness really means, because I feel like that is a term that is thrown around loosely. And oftentimes in certain spaces, it is seen superficially. It is the sort of superficial positivity, like good vibes only kind of spirituality spaces, which are not acknowledging, first of all, the wholeness of humans, right? That there is no good and bad, we are whole, right? This is part of what we recognize and deepen when we are in a true spiritual journey of understanding and accepting our wholeness and our full selves. So that's one. And also this idea that this sort of, again, superficial idea of enlightenment, which starts and ends with you and has people living kind of very isolated. I'm in my box, I'm enlightened, so everything is fine, right? Like the reality is that we are wired for connection. I believe that we are here to love. And how can I be wired for connection and be here to love and not care that 5 neighborhoods down, there's somebody really suffering, right? Like, how can I not be impacted by that? And so, first of all, just from a place of humanity and empathy, I think especially there's a conversation here that's important around privilege, right? Recognizing those of us who have privilege in any kind of box that fits in, whether you are highly educated, whether you are white, whether you have a certain economic position, how are you using that privilege and how are you recognizing that privilege to have a positive impact in the world, to recognize and shift the way that things are so that we can be operating not from a place of oppression and not from systems of oppression. How are you working to take those things down? And then, so coming from a place of rejecting the superficiality of some of these consciousness spaces, recognizing that there's room for you to do some work, room for you to recognize your privilege and use it in a way that is impactful and good. And third, which is getting to the practical stuff, I think it's all about choosing your lane. I think we all get to choose a lane and go for it. And you might have different lanes at different moments of your life, right? Like for me, in the last year and change, I moved in with my partner, we got engaged, we have a blended family together. And I feel like so much of my life in the last year has been like, okay, what does it mean to be a stepmom? And, how do I show up true to these values that I believe in and I am with our children, in my family, in these new social circles that I'm moving in these new spaces. And so for the last year, that has been my focus. But I've brought those values and I've brought that understanding and that consciousness it's just become part of who I am. So I bring it here. And so recently, with everything that's been going on, I've been thinking, all right, what's next? What is my lane next? How can I make an impact next?
Yeah. So it sounds like having people kind of hone in on, there's no one right way to do this. You can, and it'll change over the years, but really kind of honing in on what are your values? What are your values? What is your ability to give? What is the, privilege that you have? And how can you work within the circles that you're already in a way that feels authentic to you?
Absolutely.
So for someone who's just kind of like thinking about this, at the beginning, is there any other like insight you can share of what kind of helped you at the beginning of your journey, or just a little bit more details of, okay, like I'm overwhelmed by all the things, like now what?
I feel like for me, a lot of it started when I was in my mid-20s and I was living in New York. And the true sort of came from a desire to shift careers. And I felt like I wanted to work in the nonprofit space, but like really advocacy. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So I decided to start volunteering. And at the time, one of the things that I was most passionate about was, and continues to be, reproductive rights. And so I walked up to the Planned Parenthood of New York City and I became part of an activist council that they had. I remember we had this incredible training. And then I had a really fun time for many summers going out with some friends and handing out condoms and lube and sexual education at different events. And it was fantastic. Also, some of the work I did in that moment of my life is some of the work that I've been most proud of is we were part of an escort group that we would stand outside abortion clinics. And we were like a friendly, helping presence for anyone who wanted to come inside who was being harassed and attacked by protesters right outside the clinic. And so it was like, we would wake up at 6 a.m. every Saturday and go to the clinics and do this and stand outside and do this work. And it was deeply fulfilling. It was really challenging, but it was necessary. And so at one point in my life, that's what it looked like. And then later in my life, it looked like, all right, so I'm going to choose these 3 local or state political candidates who are pro-choice, and I'm going to do pro bono marketing consultations with them, right? And these days I'm thinking about how do I organize my friends to do fundraising for women who need abortion care. And so you see how at different moments of your life, your sort of desire to move in a certain direction or your passion for a particular cause might look like different things in different moments in time. My life doesn't allow the flexibility to do what I did when I was in my mid-20s anymore. So it looks different today, but it's still an impact and it's still me showing up true to what I care about.
And I feel like oftentimes I've talked to and interviewed a couple of different people who are really passionate about activism. And what I've heard again and again, it sounds, is looking at your local community, your local life. So if it's finding an organization that you can volunteer for, that's a cause or a mission that you really care about, or talking within just your circle of friends and seeing how you can fundraise for a specific local cause that you care about. I think sometimes, I know for me, when I think about the like huge global scale, it can feel a lot more daunting than, okay, what's my neighborhood? What can I do inside of that space that feels like I'm making some kind of impact? Like you said, it was super fulfilling to be able to see every Saturday morning being in front of that space and communicating with the people that you're trying to support. I think finding ways that you can just make it really like tangible.
And having said that, you might be in a situation where you get creative, because I remember around this time of my life, I was living in New York, and I remember the 2008 when Barack Obama was like campaigning to be president. I was also volunteering for that campaign. 2017 and I spoke Spanish, and our services weren't really urgently needed in New York City, but a bunch of us would get on buses for Latinos for Obama and drive 4 hours to Allentown, Pennsylvania to canvass and knock on doors there.
Nice.
And so recognizing that wherever you are, there may be an opportunity for you to have an impact, even if it's not necessarily locally, but like in a localized way.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So understanding your own strengths and seeing, okay, if there's not an immediate need right here, like maybe there is an hour away or 2 hours away.
Yeah.
And I'm also hearing too of you talked about doing it with your friends and having it be something that you have community with and sisterhood and having people around, I would imagine probably made it a lot more like motivating or easier to do.
100%. It's also an incredible way to connect with people, especially if you're new somewhere. When I moved to Miami in 2012, I remember feeling very disconnected. I mean, I moved to Miami because I had a child and I had just gotten divorced and I wasn't going to be, and my parents were here and they were like, are you crazy? Just come down here. We'll help you. But I remember moving to Miami and being super scared. I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm just going to have to do this for my son because moving with a bunch of Republicans. And for me, that was like the mentality of what I was walking into. I loved New York. I still do. And it was just this thing that I had to do. But I realized there was a moment when I came down here and I was like, if there's 5 cool people in Miami, I'm going to meet them and I'm going to be friends with them.
Yes.
And it was just this almost decision. And in that time, I met some people that were part of this local Progressive Leaders Fellowship, which I later applied for and got. And literally through that community, I met most of my close friends to this day, including my fiance.
Nice.
And so to put yourself in spaces where you are values aligned with other people just opens up worlds for you that I think are just feel more meaningful than connecting on other things, like on hobbies. Like if you connect with somebody that's at a values level, I think it really, I don't know, for me, that was really important. So
yeah. And it makes it feel a little lighter. You know, these can be very heavy causes we're all facing. So I think that people can sometimes get burnt out when they just think about how, you know, draining and miserable and whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, listen, another thing that I always recognize often is that anger is not a sustainable strategy. Anger can be very mobilizing, can be very powerful, but it's important you can do this work with people that you enjoy and that you have fun with. And it can be an enjoyable experience and a very fulfilling experience to be doing this work and to be doing it with people that you care about. You know?
Yeah. I love that. That's so beautiful. And I'm curious too, on your journey of following your spark and the ups and downs, in the moments of the biggest challenge, what helped you through that? Or what did that look like? Because we all face that along the way. And you said it's been many different evolutions as you've gone. So yeah, what was something that like doused your flame and how did you like help reignite that?
1000% sisterhood. 1000%. It's cultivating the kinds of relationships where you can show up at their doorstep with snot crying because you feel like your world is falling apart, and somebody will hold you and support you and be there with you and remind you that you're going to be okay.
Beautiful.
And also remind you of your power and remind you of how amazing you are, right? When you're ready to hear it.
Right.
But I would say this is not something you're meant to go through alone, which is why so many times it's so interesting. I have people come to me for one-on-one work and I end up convincing them to join a group program, because in a group program where we are all, sometimes one-on-one work is right, but sometimes you really are just going to get so much from the collective intention and the collective power. Also, that person's going to learn from everyone there and grow from everyone there. And so the juiciness and the richness of that experience is so powerful. And I think is an essential element, because you realize that when you're sitting there and you hear someone else talk about what they're afraid of, what's held them back, what their fears are, and what their challenges have been, you're like, oh, like my friend Jamie says, my bullshit is not unique. Like, I'm not special because I've had these. We're all scared. You know, like we're all like doing this scared, and it's fine. Like we can move forward together. You see that mirrored, and you find the courage within yourself to speak your truth out loud, and then we all start healing together. And to me, that's just,
there's definitely something special about that feeling of I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one who's ever experienced this, because we can definitely, I don't know if you can relate, but I know I can definitely sometimes be like, nobody else.
Oh, 1,000%. And it's so
I'm the
funny.
only one.
My friend Mariana always says that life is just a series of remembering who we are and forgetting and remembering and forgetting. We're just kind of rolling through it. But that's it. I feel like no matter how many years you've been doing this, you're still going to forget sometimes. And that's why it's nice to have friends to be like, hi, remember what a badass you are? Calm down.
Exactly.
I'll be right there. Like, so it's nice.
Oh man, I love it so much. And I know pleasure is a big part of your practice and what you infuse into your work. So what role has that played in your life?
Oh my God, that's been a whole reclamation for me because I feel, and in many regards, I feel like many of my identities I had identified with struggle. And so the identity of an immigrant, the identity of single motherhood, I had just thought, well, my life is going to be hard. Like things have to be hard. And in order, like adult lives are hard. Children can have fun and relax. But the moment that you become a grown up, your life has to be hard. And so I just had that story so super programmed in me. And it has been, I feel like my own spiritual journey and my own peeling of my layers and shadow work has led me to a place of understanding like, oh no, actually it's supposed to be juicy and loving and delicious. And I am guided and taken care of and I can trust. And so, yes, I can go to the beach on a Wednesday morning. It's going to be okay. Yes, I can like treat myself over here and embody pleasure and abundance and watch it come right back to me. And yes, I can trust that the inspired action is going to come. And so that willingness to make pleasure a cornerstone of your life and to allow yourself to feel good and not feel guilty about it is still a practice for me, which is why I'm so intentional about talking about it and reinforcing it, because I do think that so many of us need it. I think so many of us have come to associate, especially women, like we're socialized and conditioned to sacrifice for others, for our children, for our spouses, for our workplace, like, and put ourselves last. And so I am super excited to have like my little grain of sand and like breaking that down and having us reclaim and recognize our pleasure as our divine birthright.
I love it. What's the last thing you did that was like super amazing pleasure, like ridiculous?
So I had my two best friends from my whole life, we've known each other 35 years, came to visit and we took a couple days and just went to Naples. They live in London. So we just went to Naples for a couple days. And this required me like talking to my fiance and being like, can you pick up my son from school and drop him off all the days? And being okay with him saying, hell yes, I want you to have fun. I want you to enjoy your time with your friends. This is brand spanking new to me. I have been so conditioned to be like, he's my responsibility and I have to be there and I have to be the only one and da 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 da, right? And to be able to say, to be like, oh wow, okay, he's old enough, my partner wants to help me, I can allow that and I can be fully present with my friends and enjoy this time and just laugh and have fun and be like unbothered by everything else. I mean, revolutionary.
It's amazing the like mind, like what's possible with the mindset shift, you know, even though like I'm a coach and I've been doing this work forever, like it still blows my mind how just the thought of believing you deserve pleasure can then change everything and have you ask your partner to help and put all these other things in motion. But if you hadn't believed that, you never would have made that request or you never would have took the time or whatever. It's just it's amazing.
It's amazing. And it keeps showing up. You keep peeling the layers and it keeps showing up. It keeps showing up. But I'm glad to keep showing up for it.
I love it. I love it. So there's so much for me, like trust and faith that goes into being an entrepreneur, continuing to do this work. Is there anything else that helps you stay connected in the moments where nothing has started working yet, or the results haven't shown up yet, or the impact hasn't happened? What has helped you stay on your path, just stay committed to that spark and keep going and not give up?
I mean, for me, it's my daily practices are my rock. I have my altar. I have it right here next to my desk. I love journaling. I feel like my truth just comes out in journaling. I love taking nature walks. Those daily sacred practices really bring me back to myself. And I have certainly seasons where I feel like I need to go even further. And so, for instance, this year, my word of the year is devotion. And I'm working with my friend, Marlene Menendez, who's a shaman on a one-on-one program called The Mystic Path. And so it's an apprenticeship I'm doing. And it was a way, by signing up with this with her, it was a way for me to ensure that my spiritual development and my spiritual growth would continue to be a central part of my life all of 2022. and everything I would create, because coming into this year, that's all I knew. And so for me, that soul work is directly tied to just developing a general sense that I can trust, that I am guided, and that I'm going to be okay, and that I can continue my path and continue to follow my intuition. It is simply a daily reinforcement of all of that. So as things happen, there have been days this year where I have been on the floor of this office, like crying and sleeping all day, because that's how it's felt, right? Like the death of the ego and the death of the faces of you and the versions of you that get to go, right? That it's time for them to leave, and sort of being able to move through those cycles and be supported through it, and know that the thing that I always talk about is that like those cycles don't knock me out anymore. Like I live them, but I know that I have a different foundation now, because the spiritual and the soul work has been happening for so long that my new foundation is now trust. I know that I'm going to be okay. And it took me a long time to get here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just that commitment.
Yep. Which reminds me, and I had this kind of realization a couple of years ago of wanting to progress in some of those same areas, and realizing for myself of, oh, the same way you can strengthen your body, you can strengthen these other skills of intuition and trust and everything else. So developing that practice is so crucial. And it's like the same as if you went to the gym and worked out once, and then you like don't have muscles and you're like, why isn't this working?
Exactly.
It's because it takes time. And it just reminds me of the importance of, okay, if you say you value something, or you say something as a goal, whether deepening your intuitive practice or whatever it is, you're investing your time, money, and energy in doing things that are going to be aligned with those intentions.
Absolutely.
And absolutely. It's a powerful reminder of, well, you can do it. Anyone, whatever you want to work on, whatever it is, there are ways to practice whatever muscle, whatever skill you want to deepen. And it's just the question of, you can make the choice one way or the other. And do you choose to have the commitment and dedication to whatever?
Absolutely. And you can baby step it. But I always say the consistency is more important than what it is that you do. Because now I'm in a phase that I get bored and I want to do different things every day. I had a time where I was doing the same thing every day, right? But I continue to show up. I continue to show up for my divinity and the divinity around me. And then what's really beautiful is I feel like you get to a point where you're like, okay, every moment is magic. Okay, cool. I'm constantly like in community and in communing with my divinity. Cool. It's awesome.
I love it. I love it. And I know you've done shadow work too. And I don't know if you experienced this, but I'm definitely at a point of, I have those amazing moments where, yes, community is everywhere. Everything is magic. And then there will inevitably be the shadow will come again, or that whatever that next level, because we're constantly growing and expanding. And I think for a time I was like, oh, there'll be a point where I'll just live in that state always. And if I work hard enough, I will just be in this high vibrational state all the time. And that is not the case for me.
That is not the case. That is not the case for anybody. I don't believe, not on this planet anyway. Maybe Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle might live there. Maybe. But he might be the only one.
So there's definitely a lot more ease and grace that comes with that acceptance. So there's always going to be these moments of, you see the light for a minute and everything just feels blissful and clicks. And then there's going to be moments where you're shedding and releasing and on the floor crying and everything else. And what I've been trying to remember for myself, no matter what state of that cycle I'm in, there can always be beauty in this moment, whatever I'm feeling. The pain, the pleasure, like whatever.
I remind my clients about this all the time. Like, you cannot escape your human experience. You can get as enlightened as you want. You're still going to be a human being. And that human experience, because I feel like for me, those are the moments that, my God, the power of grace and giving yourself grace. You know, it is so beautiful and it is so important. It is a critical part of your spiritual development and your spiritual growth to be able to give yourself some grace, to give yourself a break, to recognize that you're going to have good days and bad days. And guess what? In your bad days, you're still worthy. You're still abundant. You're still lovable. You're still whole. You're still perfect.
Yes.
So that seeing your greatness in those moments, that is the real spiritual work. Forget it. It's easy to see it when you're like on top of the world, right? And high, right? Like, in those moments when you're able to recognize your worth as a human being on this planet, that's the work.
Yeah, I love it. And before all these podcast interviews, I always pull a card, and I pulled one that says, I am compassionate. I understand how important it is to have compassion, not just for others, but for myself as well. I forgive myself for the times I may have let myself down. I forgive others for the same. I realize that, like me, everyone is doing the best they know with the tools they have. I am compassionate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Love it. Oh my gosh. Well, Gaby, if anyone is interested to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
So the best place to find me, GabyGuzman.com.
Beautiful. And if there was one thing that you wanted people to take away from this conversation, a biggest piece of insight or wisdom, what would you want them to remember?
I would say follow your spark because it's going to keep poking at you. Right? This spark, this intuition, this feeling that you have, this sense of purpose, this thing that's calling you, it's going to keep poking at you. So you may as well just listen, just dive into the journey, stop fighting it. If you needed a sign to stop fighting it, this is your sign.
Yes. Stop resisting, just go.
Yes. Just let it in.
I love it. Well, my last question that I always ask because I feel like so much of following your spark is sometimes following something that feels super random or just fun or just something that sparks your creativity. So what was something that you followed randomly that just sparked some kind of like curiosity, passion, interest for you? It could be like from the biggest to the smallest.
I mean, honestly, I've been painting since I was a little girl, and I suffered from in my mid-teenage years, I suffered from if you're not an artist, then why are you doing this? And over the last year or so, I've started playing with that again. And I love this idea that sometimes there's all this pressure to find your passion, or your purpose, but I am a big advocate of chasing curiosity. I'll actually show you. I painted this tree the other day that was it was out of an ancestral reading. I mean, I realized that I love to paint and I want to do it again. And so not for anybody else, but for me, because it makes me happy. And so that's a spark I followed. And it seems a little random, but it makes me very happy.
I love it. And it's such a good reminder. I mean, creativity can open up so much, and just giving yourself the space to do something that's not about productivity or anything else, just like following that. So
absolutely.
Thanks for sharing that beautiful picture.
My pleasure.
Well, Gaby, thank you so much for this. This was such a beautiful conversation, and I was so happy.
I loved it. Thank you so much, Gina. You're amazing.